It was a crime defined by two staggering extremes. 17 brutal stab wounds inflicted in broad daylight, contrasted against a motive so mundane, so fleeting, it chills the soul. This horrific public execution wasn't about revenge, organized crime, or deep-seated malice. It was about $2,000. A retired nurse died violently in a California mall parking lot, all because a mother wanted to send her daughter to cheerleading competition. The evidence pointing to the killer was immediately present, yet for 5 agonizing years the case collapsed, the suspect walked free, and justice evaporated. The question is, what single overlooked item solved a murder? And why did it take a half-decade to connect the dots?
The location was the Promenade on the Peninsula, a bustling shopping center in Rolling Hills Estates, California. The time, shortly after noon on May 3, 2018. The victim, 66-year-old Susan Leeds, a retired nurse who, according to her stepson, lived a great life and was a kind human being. But on this sunny afternoon, Leeds was found by deputies in the driver's seat of her white Mercedes SUV, suffering from multiple fatal stab wounds. The sheer violence was shocking, eventually quantified as 17 separate strikes. Investigators quickly focused on the only logical conclusion: robbery. The motive, as prosecutors would later reveal, was tragically small. Cherie Townsend, a 47-year-old mother of 2, desperately needed funds, specifically $2,000, to pay for her daughter and 2 friends to attend an upcoming cheerleading competition in Florida. But while the motive was cheap, the killer made an expensive mistake. Right there, underneath the victim's white Mercedes SUV, investigators found the first major clue: a discarded cell phone. It was the kind of crucial evidence that should have immediately sealed the case, and initially it did. A mother was immediately arrested, linked by this abandoned device. But if the case was solved within weeks, why would the district attorney's office then reject the charges, letting a suspected killer walk free?
Based on the cell phone found at the scene, Cherie Townsend was arrested on May 17, 2018. The investigation appeared to be moving swiftly, bringing immediate closure to the horrific death of Susan Leeds. But just 4 days later, the entire case ground to a halt. On May 21, 2018, the Los Angeles County District Attorney's Office rejected the case, stating they required further investigation. Townsend was released. The community and the victim's family were left stunned. The evidence was there, found literally under the victim's car, yet the suspect was back on the street. Townsend was quick to leverage this freedom. She maintained her innocence, claiming she was only linked to the killing because she had accidentally dropped and left her phone in the parking lot. She told authorities she had merely been shopping for her son's prom that day. Far from remaining quiet, Townsend launched a counteroffensive. In October 2018, she sued the Los Angeles County Sheriff's Department. Her allegations were serious: false imprisonment, defamation, and racial discrimination. Meanwhile, years dragged on. For the victim's loved ones, the lack of resolution was devastating. Susan Leeds' husband, whom she had been married to for 25 years, tragically died in 2022, never seeing justice. His last words to his family were heartbreaking: "My Susie didn't deserve this." The case was dead. The suspect was suing the police, and the victim's family had lost all hope. But unbeknownst to everyone, a new team was about to take a second look at the discarded phone. launching the most dramatic reversal of the investigation.
By July 2022, nearly 4 years after the murder, the cold case of Susan Leeds was formally reassigned. New investigators took charge, reevaluating every piece of evidence and re-interviewing witnesses. Their findings led to a startling conclusion. The evidence, while initially insufficient for prosecution, was now compelling enough to move forward. The renewed investigation resulted in a warrant being issued for Cherie Townsend. On August 18, 2023, over 5 years after her initial release and dismissed lawsuit, Townsend was located and arrested again for the murder of Susan Leeds. The subsequent trial, which began in November 2025, revealed the core conflict of the prosecution's case. Townsend's public defender argued forcefully that there was no direct evidence tying her to the brutal act itself. Crucially, the defense pointed out that there were no witnesses, no video footage, no fingerprints, and perhaps most compellingly, blood samples found in and around Leeds' car did not match Townsend's DNA. This contradiction was the defense's Hail Mary. If she was the killer, why was her blood not found at the bloody scene? But the prosecution had one item that trumped all others, the shocking piece of evidence found years earlier, lying silently beneath the victim's vehicle. This single item contained the definitive proof that had been missed, and it was about to seal the mother's fate.
The defense was correct. No blood samples tied Cherie Townsend to the vicious stabbing. But the case was never about the blood on the seat. It was about the item left behind. The prosecution hammered home the damning solitary fact. The cell phone, found underneath Susan Leeds' car, contained traces of DNA that definitively matched Cherie Townsend. The defense's argument that she merely dropped the phone while shopping for prom was dismissed by the jury in the face of the DNA evidence and the horrifying motive. Why would the phone of a shopper who claimed innocence be found under the victim's vehicle immediately following a fatal attempted robbery she denied committing? The jury sided with the timeline and the DNA on the device. On Thursday, December 4, 2025, Cherie Townsend was convicted of first-degree murder for the killing of Susan Leeds. The years of uncertainty had finally ended, but the profound senselessness of the crime remained. As Fred Leeds, the victim's stepson, stated, "So many lives were impacted by this murder," adding the heartbreaking truth about the low motive for such high brutality. She didn't have to be murdered for her purse. The conviction closed a painful chapter that spanned 7 years and involved 2 arrests, a high-profile lawsuit, and the tragic death of a grieving husband. The case of Susan Leeds serves as a devastating reminder that sometimes the most sophisticated crimes are solved not by complex forensic technology, but by the smallest, most careless mistake. A single dropped item, leaving behind a silent, digital confession. For the price of a cheerleading trip, a life was taken, and the quest for justice became an endurance test. Cherie Townsend now awaits sentencing in January 2026.